Hi, welcome to HMP's HR Talks. This is episode 6 already. I'm super excited. I'm here with my friend Cara, and we are excited to talk about everything HR related. And I think, Cara, you have a new topic that you want to talk about today.
I do, and I'm trying to not disclose too much, but for those who are on news, social media, they may have seen a viral clip of a particular CEO and their head of HR getting
Oh,
caught on a kiss cam at the Coldplay concert. And so now everyone is commenting on the alleged scandal. Now, I don't want to name names or companies or whatnot, just to allow those families and people to process as they need. However, I do think it does open up a relevant and important conversation of relationships in the workplace. And this spans so much more than just, I think, romantic relationships. It can be
it totally does.
siblings, parents, and kids, whatever it may be. So, Heather, do you have any stories or situations in your past that you've seen families or couples working together?
Oh, so many, I don't even know where to start. But first of all, the one thing I will remind people of is remember in today's society, you are never, ever, 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 ever alone when you are in public. And
Fair.
that's the one thing you need to remember. So it's one of those things where people always feel violated, but when you're in public, you have to assume there's a camera everywhere. And it's sad. It's super sad, but we live in a society today where this little jewel right here, everybody has one and everyone uses one and everyone posts everything everywhere.
Yeah.
So people should just be cautious in regards to that because private lives aren't private. And I feel bad no matter what the scenario is and right or wrong. And I'm not passing judgment on anyone either direction, but you don't have a personal life in public. You just don't. It doesn't matter. And I feel bad for celebrities because of that. I feel bad for, individuals who are trying to have a private life. You don't have one in public because of that nasty little beast that we all rely on so badly. So you just have to be cautious of that. That
Mhm.
aside, oh my goodness, yes. And I have a huge opinion on it from an HR perspective
Oh,
because of all of the situations and scenarios that I have been privy to in my career. So nepotism is rampant in a lot of industries, especially agricultural industries and manufacturing industries.
okay.
Agriculture especially because a lot of times it's family dynamics that come from other countries and come to work in agricultural industries, right? And so when one family member has an opportunity, usually because they're the ones who speak English, are able to get into an agricultural business, potatoes, berries, flowers, whatever it is, right? They're able to get into the business and then they bring their family members in to find jobs in that same business and they vouch for them, right? Usually excellent workers. However, they are all related. And so when one ends up getting in trouble, getting fired, getting promoted, whatever the case may be, the rest of the family dynamic is impacted by it.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a huge issue at times. And half the time you don't even realize because they don't tell you that they're related. And then it becomes an issue when you find out they're related. And then it blows
Yeah.
up in your face. So one of the things I have to remind employers is, and something we don't do very often, is you need to ask your employees, are you related to anyone here in this business? And we don't
Mm.
always ask that question. When was the last time in interviewing? When was the last time in hiring that you ever asked an employee that question?
I don't think I ever have. Well,
Exactly.
I'm
Most HR people don't remember to ask, and no employee is going to outwardly tell you that. They're just not. Because if you don't ask, they're not going to tell.
and it's scary because so much of it is networking too, where and I love
Totally is.
networking, and networking is great and it helps us find key talent, but it is insidious
Yeah.
if that network is
Uh-huh.
your child. And I'm going to speak to it from a personal level though. So I'm going to speak for the other scenario. So my mom worked at a nonprofit organization, spent a decade there, and did require some HR support and help. And so I came in to help. And I was actually very intentional about not disclosing. I wanted to, I called her Miss Lehman on calls. Oh, I just told you all my last name, but okay, it's fine. Uh, but I called her that because I couldn't call her by her first name. It made me feel so uncomfortable to do so because I'm like, I can't call my mom by her first name. And so, but in the
And no
workplace,
one knew that you were related to her?
Well, some folks did, and that was the sweet thing because my mom was so proud. So she was like screaming it from the rooftops to like her team. Whereas I wanted to make sure I was like, I want to be here because of my merit. I want to show them that I'm doing good work. And especially because I wasn't doing employee relations necessarily, so that was helpful, but I didn't want them to feel like HR was compromised. And if they did have a conversation about my mom, I wanted them to still feel like they could tell me and trust me to take part the personal from the professional. But even with me, though, that's hard. And thankfully, that never happened. But it's weird because, yeah, she was proud of it. And I was like, I don't want anyone to know. So it's funny that you mentioned it's important to disclose. But I do think it is
It totally
important to
is.
disclose. And then, but then on the flip side, all right, so now I've disclosed. I work for my mom, Heather. Now there's an issue. Maybe another employee in our organization is frustrated with whether it's my work ethic or my teamwork or I'm absenteeism. Now, how do you handle that? Because you know there's a relationship there, and maybe you're lateral to my mom in this hypothetical organization.
So first of all, my rule is you cannot supervise a family member. It's okay if you work in the same business, and it is a pretty much a best business practice worldwide that you cannot be supervised by a family member.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem when you work in the same business if you can be professional and if you don't work in the same department and you definitely don't supervise each other. Because there's a lot of times where family members come and they work in the same business, they share similar interests, they share similar degrees, that's how they met each other, that kind of stuff, right? And a lot of people, you spend more time at work than you do in any other environment. So you
Yeah.
do end up making friends slash partners slash whatever, right? As long as you're not working in the same environment or working for each other where that can become a problem, it's not a big deal.
Okay.
And it is truly about perception more so than reality. And why I say that is usually, and a great example is you and your mom, right? You guys have an ability to respectfully and responsibly work together in a way that you're going to make sure that neither one of you are playing, each other, right? And you know that, and you guys have that kind of ethical background, you would, but perception is reality to everyone else, right? Oh, Kara gets to go home early. Oh,
Mhm.
Kara gets better pay. Oh,
Yeah.
Kara this. Oh, this kind of stuff. I'm not going to go Kara because she's blah, blah, blah. Right? That perception is the reason that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because in business, you have to be able to go to, et cetera, right? You have to be able to feel like you can supervise everyone equally. And if people are feeling like you're treating one person differently because they're related to you, you'll never be able to gain the respect of the rest of the people on your team. So that's why it doesn't work well, especially if it's a relation, especially if it's someone you're married to, dating, that kind of stuff. Dating's the worst, right? Usually, and that's because dating doesn't last, right? You end up in situations where there's a big fight, someone breaks up with somebody, then all of a sudden everyone else is awkward in the group, and you end up with sexual harassment lawsuits that
Oh,
way because
goodness.
so and so is trying to get back together with so and so, and they're flirting with them at the work, and now the other person's mad, and you're like, oh my gosh.
It
Or what
sounds like
happened
you're
outside of work? Oh
talking
yeah.
about a personal situation.
Oh yeah, I've had many of those, right? And it carries outside of work, right? Because as soon as you've got relationships at work and then you go out after work and then something happens there and you bring it back into work and you want to make it part of work, right? So I always remind people that your work environment is a place that you need to be as professional as possible. You need to make sure you treat everyone exactly the same. And if you can't because you're related to them in any way, you probably shouldn't be working with them, right?
Mm.
Not to mention, I mean, if you and your husband worked in the same environment, lived in the same environment, wouldn't that be boring? Like, I always say that. I'm like, I like having something different to talk to my husband about than I do work, right?
That is true. Now, you did mention though not to supervise a family or a relational member. What degree of separation would you recommend if there was pre-existing relationships or you found out after the fact of, you know, there are relations
Yeah.
within this organization, or maybe it's a new one. Maybe you hire somebody on. How would you place them in the organization to where they're the most insulated, I guess, or protected from the negative perceptions?
Yeah, great call. So anytime there is a level or two between, that's where you would have the conversation. So
Okay.
if there is somebody who supervises that person,
Okay.
that's something you could look at. So let's say you had an employee who worked for a supervisor who then had a manager, right? So that supervisor was the in-between person who was able to deal with that employee directly all the time, and that manager was the one that was related to the employee. You might be able to, if the supervisor was able to hire, fire, give raises, do reprimanding by themselves. Yeah, I would totally
Okay.
say I'm okay with that
Mhm.
because that person really does have the autonomy to manage that employee separately, even though they report up to a manager.
Okay. And
Um,
if
that would
ever,
totally work. The other thing I would say, though, in regards to your question is
Mhm.
because you asked the other part of it, if you find yourself where you do end up getting into a relationship with somebody at work, right? And you let HR know, there's no reason to terminate. Figure out another solution at work. Like, okay, which one of you wants to transfer to a different area? Which one of you wants to work under a different leadership, right? Figure out another solution. It's a respectful thing to do. And people aren't going to go, oh my gosh, one of you has to immediately go. We're going to say,
Mhm.
okay, how do we figure out a better solution so both of you can stay? Because we respect the idea that you guys brought it to our attention as opposed to hiding it behind closed doors kind of thing. Because it'll always come out. Somebody will see you somewhere on camera in the middle of a
At a
concert.
concert,
Exactly.
who knows? And with that, okay, so I have like all the questions on this because I actually don't know of one. Is there like a, do you recommend a formalized process or disclosure form at either time of hire or in the handbook if a relationship happens? And then my other question, which is if it's lateral, like let's say we are both individual contributors, my mom and I are both individual contributors. Is there any issue there if we're in different departments, or could we even be in the same department?
Sure. So first one, a lot of applications actually ask that.
Oh.
And a lot of companies no longer use applications. They do resumes and that kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
But there are still companies that use applications. And a lot of times it'll say, how did you hear about this job? Or were you referred? Or are you related to anyone who works
That's,
here?
you're right. Okay.
Mhm. So applications are still where you can catch it.
Okay.
If not, in interviews, at time of hire, you can ask the question. I don't ever make anyone sign a form saying, hey, I'm not related to anybody here at this facility.
Okay.
I do make sure the question's asked, especially in particular environments where there's large amounts of employees, right? If it's a smaller company, 10, 20, 30 employees, 50 employees, I don't always ask. If it's a referral, I do, because the referral came from someone inside the building. I'm like, oh, how do you know that person? Is how I say it. I don't ask if you're related. I say, how do you know the
Uh,
person who referred you?
okay.
Right? Because I want to know if you're related, but I'm not going to outrightly ask that question. Um, but I document how they know the person
Okay.
on their resume or their paperwork. One, because usually there's some kind of referral bonus or a referral,
Yeah.
thank you or something that I'm going to give to that person. But two, because I want to know how they're related.
Okay.
But I don't formalize it in some kind of a document saying, hey, sign this indicating that you did not, you weren't related to this person. But if you do an application, then it definitely is on there. That was the first question you asked. The second one is laterally. Totally. I have no problems with lateral,
Okay.
um, unless there is an issue. So
Okay.
usually if you're related siblings, mother, daughter, father, son, a husband, no, we'll get back to that one. Usually if it's siblings, if it's family members that are not married, I never, ever, ever even say anything. I'm like, okay, cool.
Okay.
If they're married, I say something.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it, but I always have a conversation. And the
Okay.
conversation that I have is a reminder conversation. Hey, as spouses, I need to remind you that as workers, you cannot bring any of that into the work environment.
Mhm.
Just remember that once you step into the door, you guys are colleagues. Once you step into the door, anything that happened outside of work has to leave because you need to remember that the people that you're working with don't need to know about any of the personal stuff that's going on in your lives.
Yeah.
I know you guys are professional. I know that's not going to happen. This is just my spiel that I tell everybody when they come into the building. And I always say that because I don't want them to assume that I assume they're
Yeah.
going to do it. But I always give them that spiel because I want them to think twice about the fact that they had a fight that morning before they came into the office. The fact that they disagreed yesterday about such and such. The fact that they're, in the middle of a knockdown drag out over a divorce, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? I don't want them to not forget that that can't come into the office, even as colleagues, right? Because then
Mhm.
it becomes my team against your team. Or, you know what, when so and so's team responds, don't ask them or answer any of their questions right now because we're not talking to that team about
Oh
such and such
gosh.
thing.
Yeah. No.
So it can get like that if there is bitterness
Yeah.
between the two, even as colleagues. So I just had the conversation if you're married, to just say, hey, just remember that when you come into the office, it's about being colleagues. It's about respecting each other and the teams that you're overseeing. I know you'd always do that. I know you're professional and that would never come into play with you guys, but it's just my spiel in HR. I say it to everybody so that that de-escalates the fact that they're thinking I'm thinking about them, but it's something I always recommend.
Okay, I love that. But okay, but now that brings up a good point. Let's say it does escalate. You have had the conversation with them. It was really that all of a sudden things do blow up, things do get kind of nasty. Maybe now they're sitting in a meeting room and it's like, well, you didn't do the dishes last night, so you don't get a chance to talk about my feedback on my presentation or whatever it might be. What then? Because now everyone's like, that was awkward and it was bringing in the personal. Does it ever move to termination or like what happens if there are the
Yeah.
personal and the professional blending?
Yeah. If I don't give them many chances when it comes to that because it's not them that's impacted, right? That
Yeah.
whole group of people now feels super awkward, right? They're sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, like what do we do? Like how do we interact with these people?" And even if they make up, like, "Oh, we're all fine tomorrow," like kiss
Yeah.
kiss hug, like everything went fine. We did the dishes last night together. Whatever the case may be, and tomorrow they come back fine. Those people aren't fine.
Yeah.
Like they didn't make up. They didn't get to have dishes done for them, right? They're still feeling really awkward. So those entire teams are impacted negatively. So I don't give many chances on those kinds of things because I had the conversation in advance, right? They had a
Mhm.
first warning before they even started. So they get one more opportunity after that. And it's a quick opportunity. So they get called in, and it's one of those things that says, we talked about this. This is a no-go for me. Your teams are fully impacted by this. You both have tonight to figure out how you're going to fix the team. I don't care about how you fix yourselves. You're going to come back tomorrow and you're going to let me know how we're going to fix the dynamics of your teams because they both could come in here and file that they felt harassed by you. Because if
Oh,
you had a sexually harassing conversation, which is what it is if two spouses are harassing each other in a work environment, if they feel harassed by what you guys did, they could report it to me and then you guys both be terminated. So unless you want to come back with a solution for how you're going to solve that problem for them and make them all feel good, we've got a bigger problem. And I'm about that direct with them
yeah.
because it's not okay to bring your home life into a work environment like that. It's just not because lots of people are impacted.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's always the inevitability of like the picking sides. We don't mean to, but it's like by nature of having a working team, there's always going to be workplace friendships. I'm going to say friendships and loyalties and camaraderie. And inevitably, there's going to be like, wow, well, the way she said that came off this, or the way he said that was not nice, or whatever it might be. And then naturally, those, I don't want to call it prejudices because that's not biases or interpretations or
Yeah.
perceptions. Those can then negatively paint the way that we do work with that person or that whole team moving forward. And so I love that approach.
It
So
makes it
again,
so dysfunctional.
well, we'll see. So I am the guilty party. I've worked with and for my mom. My husband and I met at the workplace. Though funny story, we did not date in the workplace. I was actually dating another coworker at the time, which I did disclose to my boss before I
Okay,
accepted
okay.
the date. I went in there. It was so awkward. It was like recently after college, and I was this boss's admin, and he was actually overseeing this other individual. But that individual asked me on a date. Very nice. But I went into my boss's office and I was like, hey, Name invited me out for a date, and I just wanted to make sure it would be okay if I accepted. But if it's not acceptable in the workplace, I just wanted to get it out there because I felt really close to this manager. He was my boss, I was his admin. So we worked really closely together, and he was like so for it. And I think we were one of three couples. Like he was a matchmaker, which I don't think is, I would not condone, actually. I would not condone
No,
it.
me either.
Um, but I will say, my husband and I, after we both left that organization, it was because of this boss that we now connected, and he
Oh,
was the best man at our wedding. So,
oh.
But see, I am the guilty party. Now, I will say my husband and I, we only started dating after he had both left. It was because he moved to the city that I'm located in. And the boss was like, please reach out to him to make sure he has friends. And now we're married. So that's our
Okay,
story.
well, that's super cute. Do you still keep in contact with that boss?
Yes, he's a mentor. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. And he
Oh,
definitely had a lot of investment in his team, which was really wonderful. But with that also being said, I think it was a government role, and he was really trying to change the organization. And as we know, sometimes when we try to change establishments that have been doing certain things one way for a long time, it can be hard. And so it
yeah.
did create like an old guard versus new guard mentality. And then because of the commingling of, these younger, recently out of college or law school graduates coming in, and then they kind of formed their group, and then there were couples pairing up, there was a bit of concern. And, credit to other managers in that organization who actually approached me privately and were like, hey, I just want to make sure that you're feeling comfortable, that, there's nothing like weird going on. And at first I was like super taken aback. But now as an
Wow.
HR professional, I can see, okay, there was kind of a really big shift happening in the organization. And so there was concern by other managers about why are all these new college grads coming in and why are they all dating? It was very MTV, like an MTV reality show.
Okay, that is, and but the problem with that is that's where you end up with lawsuits for sexual harassment. That's where you end up with those kinds of lawsuits is in environments where people are dating, and that's what the environment is like. All it takes is one person who thinks that that's the norm in the environment and hits on somebody who isn't interested,
Yeah.
right? And then they are totally offended by being hit on in a work environment, and that that's the norm in the environment, and they go ahead and they file a lawsuit. And if
Yeah.
that's what's happening in the work environment regularly, that work environment is going to become a breeding ground for lawsuits. And so
Yeah.
it's HR needs to be really careful in managing what the culture and the environment is. And I love that your boss wanted to do that and felt that that was a good thing to do in a work environment. But in today's society, which is different than then, because you guys have been married for how many years?
Oh my goodness. 6, 7,
Yeah,
almost a
exactly.
decade.
Yeah,
We got
exactly.
together
Like
for
a
that long.
long time, right? Congratulations for that. But so that was more norm than now. Like today, in today's society, holy crow, man. You look at somebody funny in a work environment and they're like,
Yes,
boom, like, where's
absolutely.
HR? So, and I know that because I get one too many of those phone calls where so and so like stared at me like for 2 whole seconds longer than they should have. And you're like, were they staring at
Yeah.
you or the fly on the wall behind you? Like, are you sure?
Yeah.
But you have to be
Right.
so cautious nowadays. And so it's even more why you have to be careful about the whole dating thing. And
Yeah.
then you have to be even more careful. I have a client that one of their managers who no longer is there was dating one person, married, then started dating someone while they were still married. Um,
I've seen that happen at
yeah.
another organization I was in as well.
And you're like, uh,
Yeah.
because now it's really awkward because everybody in the work environment knows this person's still married. The wife obviously doesn't know he's dating somebody in the work environment. He's dating one of his like employees. First of all, dating an employee. Second of all, doing it while he's married. Like, you're just like, what is wrong with this? There's so
Yeah.
much wrong with this work environment, right? And you
Yeah.
can't have that because other employees are being impacted. And
Yeah.
when work is being impacted negatively by the actions and the relationships, it doesn't matter whether it's friendships, whether it's family member dynamics, like the mom's yelling at the son every day because he
Yeah.
forgot to do his laundry last night before he came into the office, or because he's late every day, right? I don't know, right? Or because of a relationship, because of love, right? Whatever it is, if it's impacting the production and the work
Mhm.
environment, it's a no-go. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
what the relationship is. And that's what you have to think about when you're doing those things from an HR or a business owner's perspective is this relationship negatively impacting the culture, the production, the other employees in the work environment? And if it is, it has to end, or they have
Yeah.
to be split, or it has to be changed. You can't keep going with it.
Yeah. And I love that you focus. It's not about the person. It's not about the emotions. You do what you got to do, be with who you got to be, but there is a component of the perception, the production, the impact, and I like how it comes back to this is not passing judgment on your relationship. This is not passing judgment on
Yeah.
how things came to be, but it is a protection for those who are outside of that bubble, that they're still able to do the work that they need to do well, and that this is still a safe place for them to do their work. So I really appreciate that that is that focus, because that's the consistent message I've got from you throughout this conversation of, we are here for you and we are willing to make things work. That here are the safeguards that we're going to have in place to make sure that not only you, but your teams, your colleagues, your whoever it may be, they are going to be insulated from anything personal that might be happening. And you know what? I feel like work is sometimes a really great, to your point, it's a wonderful, different topic of conversation, but two, sometimes it can be a great intermission if there is a heated conversation or emotion. Sometimes you just need a little bit of that intermission. And then when you come back at the end of the workday, it's like just having some time, space, and perspective now allows for that not to feel a little less heated or less emotionally driven. So,
I
anyhow,
agree.
I've been seeing it all over my Instagram feed. And so it's been a hot topic. But do you have any other tips, tricks, or comments for maybe some business owners or HR teams that maybe have never faced this before? What can they do today or tomorrow? A quick tip that would help them prevent their organization from any sort of scandal.
I would just say make sure that you're having those conversations, right? So keep up on when you're hiring people in, ask the question, do you have any relationships with individuals who are working here, especially at management level? And then when you are doing leadership training, which is critically important, whether they've been leaders for a really long time or new leaders, make sure that you're training your leaders. But when you're having leadership training, remind them about relationships in the workplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remind them about observing their teams, and if they're noticing relationships with their teammates, pull those teammates in and talk to them about it. Remind them that it's important to be able to keep their relationships separated from the work environment so that they can make sure that the rest of the team isn't feeling impacted by that relationship, that the production is doing exactly what it needs to be doing, and that the quality of work is there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
keep making sure that you're training leaders, that you're having those honest conversations, and that when you see something starting to happen, that you pull in those employees and have a conversation with them right away.
Okay, I love that. And thank you for letting me interview on this, because I was like unsure what I would do in this scenario. And as you've seen, I've been on the receiving end, and thankfully it's worked out, I think, hopefully. So, but it's been really nice to hear your perspective. But with that, this concludes our sixth HR talk with HM
So
Pinnacle.
excited.
So just remember, if you think you've had a bad day in HR, every challenge, every topic that we talk about is just an opportunity to grow. So thank you for spending time with HM Pinnacle, and we'll chat with you next time.
Thanks. Bye.